Welcome to When Creativity Knocks All-Star Designers Holiday Series. And Cindy's got something cooking up for us for Thanksgiving. Cindy, I see you have done some wonderful tableware for Thanksgiving.
Yes, I did. And the first thing I did was wanted to etch my glass so that it would have this beautiful frosting effect. And in order to do that, I did want to be able to have my leaves, and I wanted to mask those out.
Okay.
So I used Etchd's etch mask, and I die cut it.
It does really die cut nicely,
with
doesn't
this
it?
great Thinlits autumn leaf set. I did only use the smaller ones. It comes with some big leaves too, but I only used the smaller ones. And once I got those, I placed them onto the outside of my wine glass, and I just randomly placed them. And I also placed them for the dinner plates. I did the back.
Okay, on the back.
So
All
I
right.
placed them face down on the back of my dinner plate. And then after I did that, I used my etched etching cream, and I put on a good thick coat, sort of the consistency of, say, peanut butter. Let it set 15 minutes, return it to the bottle because it's reusable, and then rinsed it clean. And we do have a full tutorial where Anna shows you how to use etched on our site to give you some more tips and pointers. But once it was rinsed clean and dried, I went ahead and I removed that etch mask. Will just peel right off.
And that stuff really sticks really
It
well.
sticks, which is good. You want it to.
It gives you that great detail.
So that you don't get a blur underneath. You can see it's stuck down really well, but it does come right off. And then you end up with these beautiful open areas that did not take the etching.
Yeah.
I did put my etching cream all the way down to the base of my wine glass, all the way around. And then I did the same thing over the entire back of the dinner plate.
Okay.
So once I got my beautiful etched leaves, they were beautiful, but I wanted to add a little bit more color. I'm calling this my Colors of Autumn table setting. So it needed to have some colors of autumn. To do that, I used DecoArt's gloss enamels, and this is some of their glass paint. And it's a great way to add some color to the areas that you want. It will work beautifully on the etched glass, but it also works beautifully on the unetched glass. And that's the effect that I wanted. We'll tuck these over. I tend to put just a little bit in my cap so that I can have some to work with. Right, and kind of hold on to it a little better. And I used a fine paintbrush, and I painted over the unetched areas. And I did put 2 coats, and I used the different autumn colors that I chose from my color palette. You can see the single coat is almost a little more translucent.
So really, if you want that look, you just kind of play around with it.
Yeah, you can play around. You can feather the edges and make it lighter in the center, but it takes it beautifully. And I did want them just to look hand-painted.
And yeah, they really do.
So they
have
still
that
look hand-painted, but it's almost like a stenciling process. But you have your beautiful frosted glass, and then you still have your colors of autumn on the different leaves that you used.
It really did frost up lovely.
I did want to add some metallic accent because metallics continue to be very hot in decorating and holiday decorations. So I used some of the Americana multi-surface satin paint from DecoArt for that, and I used their copper. And I painted a rim around here, and then I painted the base of the glass.
Okay.
And again, on the back of my plate, I painted a rim of that same copper.
So you did the rim on the back,
The
not
rim on the
front.
back,
Okay.
yes. And then followed the directions to heat set the glass paint. The instructions are on the bottom on how you heat set that in your oven, so it is permanent and washable, etc. And then once our glassware was complete, I wanted to make a place setting, and I'll show you that next.
Okay. Yeah, those beautiful plate and glass need something to sit on.
Yes, our Colors of Autumn placemat is the next step. And first I'll show you how I created this base piece, and then I'll show you how I created the little accents. I started by cutting 8 pieces of felt in some coordinating autumn colors that went with the paints that I chose for the glasses.
Okay.
So I wanted the same color palette, and I cut them. They're 6 by 4.5, and we will have downloadable instructions on our website for all of this, but there's 8 6 by 4.5 rectangles of the solid color clays. And I love to paint stamp. You've seen me do this technique before. The rubber stamps are great for ink, but I love them with paint. I just like them that way. But so for this Judi Kins, this is called Floral Wave. So again, think outside the box with your stamps. You might not think flowers and Thanksgiving, but it just gives a
really
pattern.
Does work well with this.
It's a different, rather than more leaves or something. And to paint stamp for this, I'm using Deco Arts Americana Multi-Surface Satin Paint. It's a great opaque paint, and again, I used a color palette that matches the glass paints that I use, the gloss enamels. And you can use a paintbrush, but here I go again. You know, I love to get messy. I love to get messy.
Likes to finger paint.
I like to finger paint, yes. I never gotten over my preschool days. I just really like to get
You do
messy.
know Judi Kins makes a great dauber that would
They
work
do,
as well.
yes, they do. They make a wonderful dauber, but then I don't get to have the fun of getting my fingers all covered with paint, which I just like, so leave me alone. So you want,
makes you happy, honey.
if it makes me happy, let me make a mess. You put a good layer of paint over there, and then I'm just using it as a detail, so it doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to pretend I did the whole thing. And you do want to press well to transfer that paint. And you still get some of those great details.
You do, but it gives it just a...
But it's a kind of a subtle pattern
way it
back
looks,
there.
yeah.
Little scrolly pattern.
And it is because it's on felt, you're not going to get as
It's
sharp
not
of
as
image.
crisp, yes, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. It's the felt that makes it a little less clear than it might have been otherwise. So once we have our 8 squares that have been stamped, and I did just stamp along the edges and the corners of the ones that were going to be on the corners, I went up the edge. I stamped each of the rectangles with an alternating color paint so that it would show up. And I even added a little bit of the dazzling metallics in there, just a little touch of a gold metallic to do on this great cranberry felt so that it would kind of give it a little bit of a shimmer. And to assemble my felt squares, I used the basic placemat size, but you could make this any size that you want. And I'll have the exact measurements again in the instructions. But so to attach our stamped rectangles together to make our general placemat size, I'm using the Beacon Fabri-Tac, and I just put it on the edges of each piece and then mounted them. I did evenly space these two sides. We'll eyeball it for now, but
Looks pretty good to me.
and it holds very well, and it works great with felt or any kind of fabric. But we have a big hole in the middle.
Oh, really? Is that what
You might have noticed there's a little hole in the big hole in the middle. But I had this great textured embossed felt.
Yeah, I love this felt.
And it gives us a neutral background to put our plate on so the leaves will still show, but still a little bit of detail. And I really liked that. So I did the same thing with the Fabri-Tac all the way around the outside edges. And then I wanted to add a little more decorative trim. So Anna, please, if you could bring that one in, I'll show you these accent pieces on the side. This one here is 3.5 by 2.5, and it's just a chocolate brown, coffee brown kind of felt. And then this strip here is 2.5 by 6.5.
Okay.
And I wanted to, the one on this side, I just went ahead and glued down flat.
Okay.
The one on this side, you can see what it's for. It's actually like a loop that's holding, instead of a napkin
silverware.
ring,
That's
instead of a
really
separate
nice.
napkin ring, it's built right into your placemat.
That's really smart.
So you can see I only glued about 1/4 inch in on this
along here.
edge, and then I glued over about 1 inch, 1.5 inches on here, and I left this loop open so that I could tuck my napkin and my silverware underneath. Now to make, it would have been fine that way because again, I'm lumpy bumpy texture and I like details, I had to have some autumn leaves. And to make the autumn leaves, I'm using Makin's clay. I used a mixture of the earth tone set and the vineyard tone set, and I actually mixed different colors of the clay together and sort of marbled them a bit.
Well, I tell you, you really matched everything really great.
The color
to the
palettes,
paint
what we
and everything. Boy, everything's.
I had a lot of fun, and I loved how DecoArt had the gloss enamels for the glass that were almost the same
They are
tones
the same color.
as the acrylics.
That's
It
great.
really worked well. But to mix the leaves, rather than have them be a solid color, I took a couple of different clays and then just blended them, started to blend them. But I didn't completely, so that they're almost marbled. And then I used Makin's Leaves Push Mold. And these are super easy to use. Because they're clear and flexible, you can just press your clay in.
Once you put that down, there we go.
Into the mold. Now you can either just smush and then trim it with a scissor afterwards, or because they're clear and flexible, you can actually see.
Oh,
if
and
you're
then you kind
keeping,
of smush
I
it back.
can scudge it back in and make sure it's in that space, and you do not have to wait for it to dry.
I was just asked, do you want to dry to pop it out of the
They're
mold?
flexible and it'll pop right out.
Okay.
So you can
Oh,
make
wow.
all of your leaves
Look how
at
great
once,
that is.
and you don't have to stop and wait for it to
The
dry in the
marbling.
mold. It gives it a little bit of color variation.
Well, it actually looks like it's drying. It looks like a fall leaf.
Yeah, like an autumn leaf that's
That's
changing. And I
really
mixed
pretty.
up my colors from the earth tone set, and I used a little bit of the Merlot from the vineyard tones to make this one and to make some of the larger maple leaves. Like this one here is the Merlot and some of this great straw color mixed. But again, I gotta have my metallic luster a little bit, so I used DecoArt's metallic luster. And this
Okay.
copper kettle is one of my absolute new favorites. Plus it matches the copper on our glassware.
Of course it does.
And it's just isn't it beautiful?
yeah,
it's
it's
just
really
a
pretty.
cream luster that
No.
you can use on virtually any
You're
surface.
doing it while it's wet.
You can use it while it's wet or it's dry.
Okay.
It works on either. And I just touched the top because I did not want to lose that great coloring that we've created. But I
Right.
wanted to give it a sheen and a little highlight
That's
to
really
the texture
pretty.
of the actual push mold. Now once I had my leaves in the different sizes and I just mixed them up, again, you can glue them in place when they're still fresh or when they're dry. And you can use a tacky glue to do that, like Beacon's tacky glue, or I've also used the 3-in-1. I discovered the 3-in-1 works wonderfully with Makin's clay also. Stacked some up here, again, mounted some on this little loop that we made. And then the last element was if you were having a bigger group of people and you wanted to make wine glass charms, because they continue to be popular, I used the same leaves and I made a tiny hole in them with a needle.
When it was wet or afterwards?
Well, I did it when it's wet, but
Okay.
it is soft and pliable enough that with like an embroidery needle, you can still go through it when it's dry, if you're careful. Or you can use a tiny little hole punch and it'll go through it. And I added a little earring wire to make my wine glass charms, and would just have an
Super
assortment
cute.
of those out.
Wow, look at this. What a beautiful place setting.
So it's kind of the colors of autumn come together. You've got your
Get our napkin and our silverware
little
back.
tuck. You don't have to have a separate napkin ring, but if you don't want to use your napkin, you can just lay it flat, and it still looks okay.
Well, Mrs. McGee, I think I'm coming to your house for Thanksgiving
Come on
this
over.
year.
The turkey's in the oven.
We hope you've enjoyed When Creativity Knocks All-Star Designers Holiday Series. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and pin us on Pinterest.
And don't forget to follow the link on our homepage to fill out the entry form, and you'll be eligible to win a prize package full of products from all of our series sponsors.